My Friend Pedro, a game developed by Dead Toast Entertainment and released in 2019, is a heartwarming Christmas tale of outlandish acrobatic tricks, bombastic action scenes, and zany wackiness. The story of the game follows the unnamed main protagonist and his friend Pedro as they fight for their lives after a bounty is put on their heads. But by the end of the game, a story of familial strife and moral struggle is revealed, and it all has to do with the protagonist attempting to do what he sees is the right thing. So, with no restraints on spoilers, let's go ahead and summarize the events of the game, revealing the depths of betrayal that hangs over the actions of those in My Friend Pedro. The game opens with the protagonist coming to consciousness alone in a basement. Well, not alone, because a floating banana soon appears before him. The fruit introduces himself as Pedro, his friend, and fills him in on what happened to him. After checking to make sure he's okay, Pedro pushes the protagonist to escape. They pick up a stray gun they find as their own in case they need to defend themselves. Good thing too, cause not long after, they find they're prisoners of Mitch the Butcher, a man that uses his butcher shop as a front for his smuggling ring of unlicensed firearms. After yelling at one of his employees, Mitch heads off to finish getting the latest shipment ready and orders his employee to take care of the meat bag in the basement. The protagonist guns down the man that's coming for him, and then continues his escape in much the same way, blasting his way through the retired mobsters that make up Old Town to reach Mitch's fine dining restaurant at the edge of the district. In the loading area in the back, he watches Mitch drive off with his shipment, but not before ordering his men to deal with a runaway meat bag. The protagonist uses a nearby motorcycle to escape, but he's noticed by a couple of mobsters who don't intend to let their boss down. Thus begins a high-octane chase through Old Town as the protagonist fights off those that come to get him. He eventually catches up to Mitch, who means to kill the protagonist for the damage he's done to his restaurant, but he's killed when his truck flips over in a fiery explosion in the fight. After this highly visible chase, the duo need to lay low, so Pedro tells his friend to head for District Knoll so they can hide out for a while until things blow over. They pull into a makeshift bar where the National Bounty Hunters Association is having a Christmas party. They pass through, making no fuss for themselves, but stop to watch Santa Claus, also known as Denny, announce to all of those in attendance the mega Christmas bounty that was just placed. He shows a picture of the quarry, which reveals it's the protagonist. One of the bounty hunters had just seen him, so they start combing the area for their target, while Denny heads to his office. The main character makes an escape and gets a moment to breathe. Pedro says they need to find out who put out the bounty and suggests nicely asking Denny, which is a solid idea. But seeing as his office is through all of the bounty hunters, the protagonist will have to do what he does best to get there: mow down all of those wanting to cash in on his death. He does so with ease, charging into Denny's office to confront him, but the costumed man jumps out of his window, lands on an aircraft, and starts a counterattack on the protagonist, who is forced to run for his life. He's eventually trapped with nowhere to go, so has to make a stand against Denny, successfully destroying his aircraft by ricocheting bullets off of reflective panels behind it. Ever the coward, Denny jumps from his aircraft, and not intending to let him get away, the protagonist dives after him, fighting off several bounty hunters in an adrenaline-filled aerial battle. He finally catches up to Denny, who gives up the information that Pedro and his friend were hoping for. It's Denny's sister Ophelia, the dictator of the internet, who ordered the hit on them for revenge after they killed Mitch the Butcher, Denny's and Ophelia's good-for-nothing father. Then Denny stops short and seems to recognize the protagonist, but before he can get anything else out, his body is splattered on the top of a building. The protagonist is spared the same fate, falling into a deep body of water, but doing so seems to have affected him in some way, as he wakes up to find himself in Pedro's colorful world. He goes on a short tour through the vibrant landscape and helps his friend by getting rid of the haters that have invaded his home. Returning to his own world, the protagonist enters a sewer system that Pedro says connects to a rail system that will take them to the internet, where they can confront Ophelia. Along the way, they have to fight their way through the hardest of the hardcore gamers, who violently lash out at anyone they see as a result of their prolonged exposure to violent video games. And the Internet Service Protectors, soldiers used by Ophelia to protect her interests. The protagonist finds the connection to the rail system that Pedro was talking about, and hops a ride on the train, fighting his way through more of the Internet Service Protectors, to get all the way to the core of the internet. He's greeted by the dictator of the internet herself, who invites him to come meet with her deeper within. If he can survive the gauntlet of the internet, that is. As he destroys the ISPs that guard the place and dodges the beams of raw electricity, Ophelia begins to get the same kind of feeling of recognition that Denny had before his untimely demise. It takes some time, but seeing the protagonist in action triggers some sort of memory that Ophelia has, and she realizes the identity of the one that killed her father and brother, and is now making his way to kill her. The protagonist isn't given much time to understand what she means, however, as Pedro appears and pushes him to go on. As the elevator rises to Ophelia's lair, she finally shares what she's learned about the masked protagonist. He's her long-lost brother, the third sibling in their jacked-up family. But that familial bond isn't going to save him from the consequences of what he's done, and a fight breaks out between the two, with Ophelia eventually succumbing to the bullets of her brother. It is at this point, with the blood of his father, brother, and sister on his hands, that Pedro appears to his friend and offers some context for all he's done. The protagonist had always felt morally conflicted over the actions of his family, and he eventually decided to do something about their criminal actions, and send a message to all of those that would try to follow in their footsteps, but needed help in doing so. In came Pedro, who helped the protagonist concoct the plan of sneaking into Mitch's basement, wiping his memory, and knocking himself out. When he came to, he'd believe he was a prisoner of the Butcher, and fight his way out, thus resulting in all of the events that followed. And now, there's only one thing left for Pedro to do to complete the plan. He flies into the protagonist's head, who feels his arm pull upwards. A compulsion comes over him to pull the trigger, but he resists the temptation, fighting the urge off until a gigantic banana appears and swallows him whole. He finds himself in Pedro's world again, surfing a walrus that swims through the air. Pedro tells him he intends to keep his promise, swells in size, and launches an attack on his friend. The bombs he lobs towards him, though, are shot back to him and damage him enough that his banana peel melts away, revealing his grotesque, mushy, fleshy form underneath. He launches a new assault, intending to fulfill the promise he made. But try as he might, his friend has changed his mind and fights him off. Pedro lets out one final apology before exploding in a sticky, fruity mess. Returning again to his world, the protagonist pulls himself to his feet. He removes his mask to look at the brilliant sunset shining out before him, then turns to the camera, revealing he shares the same simplistic smile as his floating friend. Darkness takes over the screen, and the story of My Friend Pedro comes to an end. It's a pretty straightforward tale of betrayal, familial strife, and vigilante justice, all with a Christmas backdrop and amazing gameplay that leaves such an awesome, satisfying feeling when completed. Although the game ends with Pedro's demise, something tells me we haven't seen the last of our smiling yellow friend. But that's it for this one. Of course, if there's anything you wish to have cleared up, or if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer them. But until next time, thank you for watching and see you later.